What's up everyone, it's your boy Whack on the mic today, back again with another episode of Word of Whack. And today we're going to be looking at the matchups for the NBA playoffs and have a little chat about them. So yeah, let's get straight into it. And of course, before I get started, if you want to show some support for the channel, then be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoy it, and subscribe if you haven't already. So the first series we're going to be looking at in the Western Conference is the 1 seed Golden State Warriors coming up against the LA Clippers, who I must admit I'm surprised to see in the playoffs. That's an achievement in itself, considering the roster it had this year. Unfortunately though, they are going to get dealt with pretty easily by Golden State, and although it will be fun to see Patrick Beverley and Draymond Green renew their rivalry in a playoff type atmosphere, and the fact that the Clippers have one of the best scorers in the league in Lou Williams off the bench, there really isn't much to be discussed about the direction of this series, to be honest. I'm going to go with the Warriors in 5 games. And next up it's my team, the Houston Rockets, coming up against the Utah Jazz once again, a rematch of the second round series from a year ago, and despite Utah losing that one in 5 games, they were quite a handful at times for the Rockets. They've got Donovan Mitchell, who's no longer a fresh-faced rookie, and one of the best defensive lineups in the league, led by Rudy Gobert, who I'm sure will be picking up the Defensive Player of the Year award once again. But they are coming up against the best offensive ball player on the planet in James Harden, not to mention CP3 and Clint Capella in the supporting roles. It is in a way the unstoppable force and the immovable object here, but I think Houston should take it in about 6 games. Which brings us on to the Portland Trailblazers versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the subplots for this particular matchup are pretty interesting. First off, you've got Damian Lillard and Russell Westbrook continuing their beef from the regular season, and then there's the fact that it seemed like the Blazers were trying to lose games towards the end of the regular season just to avoid the Thunder. They played a rotation of just 6 players in the final game against the Kings, and they still managed to come back from a losing position, and they are playing the Thunder now, so it's weird how things work out. But storylines aside, I do think this will be one of the matchups where the lower seeded side comes out on top, not just because OKC won all 4 games between these two sides in the regular season, but because Yusuf Nurkic at the 5 is going to be a big miss for Portland through injury, and although Enes Kanter can be serviceable as his replacement coming up against his old teammates, Steven Adams will have the better of him over the series. Add in the potential of MVPG and Russell Westbrook wreaking havoc on the court, and it's pretty easy to come to a conclusion. I'm going to go with the Thunder in 5. And the final matchup of the first round in the Western Conference is going to be the surprise number 2 seed Denver Nuggets, led by their all-star center Nikola Jokic, coming up against the San Antonio Spurs. For me, this is the hardest series to predict in this year's playoffs, because although you've got this exciting and talented Nuggets team coming up against a Spurs team without the experience of Tony Parker, Manu, or even Kawhi to call upon, San Antonio's coach is still the one and only Greg Popovich. They've made the playoffs under the man 22 seasons in a row. DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge are still all-star caliber players when they want to be, and they're probably not going to lose at home in this series. But I just feel as though Denver's depth of talent with their scoring off the bench is going to help them over the line in a closely contested 7-game series here. Moving on to the Eastern Conference, and the first matchup we've got is going to be the Milwaukee Bucks coming up against the Detroit Pistons. And I'm sorry if you're a Pistons fan, but this is going to end up in a clean sweep. Blake Griffin is struggling with injury and is probably not going to be around for the first round of the playoffs, and without him, a 41-win team with an inconsistent Reggie Jackson and a decent Andre Drummond, it's not going to pose many problems for the teams which won 60 games over the regular season, not to mention the fact the Bucks have MVP favourite Giannis Antetokounmpo and guys like Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe posing a threat too. Moving swiftly on to the Boston Celtics and the Oladipo-less Indiana Pacers, in a series which on paper should be pretty easy to predict. The Pacers are missing their star man, and the Celtics have Kyrie playing in the postseason for them for the first time. They got all the way to the conference finals without him last year. However, Brad Stevens is going to be without Marcus Smart for this round at least, so they're going to lose a bit of that playoff level defensive IQ. And Indiana actually lost Oladipo a while ago now, which shows how impressive it is that they've got enough as a unit to at least make it to the 5th seed. As for my prediction, it has the potential of an upset, but I will back the Celtics to get over the line in 7 games in this one. Next up, we've got one of the most exciting starting lineups in the whole league from the Philadelphia 76ers, and they're coming up against the Brooklyn Nets, who managed to grab the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference. It's amazing to see how quickly they've been able to bounce back from the dark days of the KG and Paul Pierce trade a few years ago, and it's down in no small part to D'Angelo Russell. The guy's probably going to pick up the Most Improved Player award for this season, and he seriously deserves it for stepping it up another level this season. Finally playing like the number 2 draft pick he was once upon a time. But similar to the Clippers in the West, it's a good sign of progress that they've made it here, and they are going to get rolled over here by a far superior team in the Sixers, I reckon in a clean sweep. And finally, we'll get to see how Kawhi Leonard's Raptors get on in their first and potentially only playoffs run together as they come up against the Orlando Magic. And I think it's going to be a short stop for Orlando after a long-awaited run to the playoffs, because they're coming up against a perennial contender in the Eastern Conference in the Raptors. Yes, they do have Aaron Gordon and Nikola Vucevic, who became an all-star this year, playing some of their best basketball in years, but they're still relatively inexperienced, and coming up against the talents of Kawhi, Kyle Lowry, Marc Gasol and Spicy P, it's going to be ugly if you're a Magic's fan. I'm taking the Raptors in 5 games in this one to tie up the first round. So based off the first round predictions I've made, the first matchup in the second round for the West is going to be the Warriors against the Rockets, in a repeat of last year's conference finals, which almost saw Golden State fall before the NBA Finals. From a Rockets perspective, even though we didn't win as many games in the regular season this time around, I do think our roster is better equipped for the playoffs, and if CP3 can avoid injury, we might be able to make it competitive again. My heart says this isn't a team out there who can beat this group 4 times out of 7 if everyone's healthy, but you've got to consider the level of motivation Golden State will have to win that 3rd championship in a row. And given the fact that Golden State would have home court advantage this time around at the Oracle Arena, which remember they're going to be moving out of this summer, there can only be one winner here. I'm going to have to say the Warriors in 6 games. The other Western Conference semi-final would of course be the Thunder taking on the Nuggets, and again I just feel like the Thunder have something going for them which is going to drive them on to the conference finals, past 2 teams seeded higher than them. I just think the long series against the Spurs could drain the energy from Denver, and their record on the road hasn't been all that great. We all know how volatile the Oklahoma fans can be once Westbrook gets the place fired up, and I think that they'll get over the line in 6 games. Switching back to the Eastern Conference bracket, and we've got the Bucks taking on the Celtics. If you made predictions for the seedings in the Eastern Conference at the start of the season, you probably would have had these 2 switched around. That's how impressive the Bucks and Giannis were, and it shows how the Celtics kind of took their foot off the gas. Was that in anticipation of a grueling playoffs run, or is it a genuine slowdown in their growth as a team? I guess we'll find out soon enough, but for me it's going to have to be Milwaukee taking the series in 7 games. The Celtics have this ability to slow down even the very best in the playoffs when it comes down to games at the TD Garden, but even then they're not facing a one-man team here. In fact, combined with the threats from 3-point range and the sheer presence of Giannis, you could almost argue they're facing 6 men when the Greek Freak is on the court. The other matchup would of course be the Raptors up against the Sixers, and this is another tough one to call because both teams have solid starting lineups and 2 of the better benches in the entire league. Toronto won the season series 3-1, and I think they're going to be the safe bet here too, because of the fact they've constantly been in contention for a few years now. For Philly, they're still on a learning curve and on the way to true contention with a great young core, but this year's conference finals won't have them involved. Raptors in 6. So we're getting to the business end of the bracket now, and in the Western Conference Finals I think it will be the Warriors coming up against the Thunder. Of course this will bring back memories of the last time they met in the playoffs in the 2016 Conference Finals, when the OKC team led by Kevin Durant at that point blew a 3-1 lead against the 73-9 Warriors, and the rest as we know is history. A lot has changed in the OKC lineup since then, but they still have Russell Westbrook, who will be the most fired up he's ever been in his career if this happens. Facing the Warriors with this new look Thunder team with playoff P by his side, I can see them taking a couple of games in this series. But ultimately, we need to remember this is the Warriors team that won 73 games, not only with Kevin Durant on top, but DeMarcus freaking Cousins as well. They're going to do what they do best and take the series in 6 games. In the Eastern Conference Finals, we've got the Raptors facing the Bucks, the number 1 and number 2 seeds coming head to head for a place in the NBA Finals and a chance at glory. I can see this series going all the way to 7 games. It is that tight between these two teams, and I've talked about how great the Bucks have been all this season and how they aren't a one-man team and how Giannis seems to be on a mission to make himself the new face of the league. And that is all true, but Nick Nurse is a great coach who's done magnificently well in replacing Dwayne Case in Toronto, and I think the experience factor will play a part in deciding this series. Do the Bucks have it in them to make it all the way? Sadly, I think not. It would be great to see an unexpected team like them go all the way to the finals, but I just think this Raptors team is being a little slept on. They deserve more talk of being a contender than they've got recently. And after all that, we end up with an NBA Finals matchup which sees the Golden State Warriors taking on the Toronto Raptors. First of all, I think before the season began, everyone knew the Warriors were going to take the crown once again, so spoiler alert there in terms of my prediction. The fact they were able to play the regular season in third gear and still get the first seed in the West shows the levels between them and the rest of the league. And hopefully it's the last time we see such an overly stacked lineup in the NBA. DeMarcus Cousins going to be a free agent in the summer, as are KD and Klay Thompson. But I'm 99% sure that Durant's going to be sticking around for another season at least, just so he can pass LeBron for championships next year. For Toronto, there is an opportunity for them to win a game or two on home court, but ultimately I have them falling to the better team here. And when it all comes down to it, the biggest reason for that is not the fact the Warriors have the better lineup, or their home court advantage, or the motivation to win that third straight championship. It's because Drake's a Raptors fan.